Hello and welcome back to the A to Z of EFT, where I talk you through some different aspects or points of EFT tapping for your own awareness, maybe some education and learning just a little bit more about what this tapping thing really is and what it can do. So today we're going to cover the letter D, and D is for what I term as discreet tapping. Now, there are many people out there that once you start to learn about EFT, that you're not that comfortable doing it in a public place. EFT, in my opinion, and on the years that I've been using it, I consider to be one of the best self-help tools in the world. So far, with everything that I have looked at, there is nothing that comes close to the way that EFT can help you then and there, on the spot, and often so very quickly. But it's being in a position where you can actually use tapping for yourself on the spot, and not everybody can do that. Maybe you're in a meeting at work or in a public situation where something happens and you just feel a little self-conscious or maybe embarrassed about tapping. Well, there are ways around this, and again, it's a terminology that I use called discreet tapping. Now, you're still getting or stimulating the tapping points, but you're not actually making these movements or these gestures. So there are many ways to do this, and one of them is by this that we often find ourselves doing in times where we might need a little bit of comfort ourselves. It's a natural reaction for us to do this in a state of shock sometimes or surprise. So rather than actually tapping on the tapping points there, what you can do is put 2 fingers on the tapping points and just gently stimulate them. And unless other people around you know EFT tapping, they won't know what you are doing. It could just be that, you feel that you're in a state of surprise, and because this is such a natural position to hold your hand, people by and large will not question it. And then there's the one where we often do, thinking about something. That itself is a tapping point. So you could quite easily get away, quite discreetly, of just doing that, where you're thinking about something, but what you're actually doing is tapping. And on the other line of thinking, another way to do a little bit of discreet tapping is where you can stimulate these 2 points here and sort of just rest your hand as if you're resting your face. Now, I know you can't see my mouth talking there, but I know that might look a little bit strange or silly, but if you're just resting your arm on a desk, for example, you can stimulate this point here. So there are multiple ways to do some discreet tapping. And another one is obviously with the karate chop point. This is probably one of the most discreet ways, is if you're holding your own hand, and what you are doing is stimulating this point here with your fingers, but again, you're not tapping. You're just gently pulsing. I'm just over accentuating the movement of my fingers there so that you get an idea. But you are then clasping your hand, and you see my hand there gently moving. And you can do this with your hand in your lap. I'm only holding my hand up here so you can see what I'm doing. But your hand can be in your lap, or if you're in a meeting and people are irritating you, just put your hand under the desk and just gently do that. And there, I'm sitting here doing this now, and you wouldn't know that I would be doing that. So that's some of the ways to do a little bit of discreet tapping. Again, you don't need to tap on all of the points. You can rub them or just pulse them. And it can be a longer pulse. It doesn't need to be a quick pulse. You can just pretend you're resting your arm. Or there's another way that I use the finger points, and I'm hoping I can demonstrate this to you quite successfully. The tapping points are on the top of the fingernails on each hand, and rather than doing this, you can interlock your fingers together, so that ultimately what you're doing is stimulating these tapping points, but they're interlocking. And then you bring your hands together and interlock your thumb points, and it might sound a little tricky, but all you're doing ultimately is just holding your hands like this. Okay, and then just gently, again I will make the movements quite pronounced for you here, but just gently pulsing and stimulating. It can be both sides of your fingernails, which is quite all right to do that as well, because both of them cover stimulation points in the body, which I'm going to cover in later which I'm going to cover in later sessions. So just gently stimulate these points. Again, your hands can be in your lap, and nobody would be any the wiser that that's what you're doing. So I hope that's been a benefit to you. Any of the EFT tapping points, again, you can just gently stimulate, gently rub. You don't have to do the full EFT sequence and be on public display. It can be done very discreetly. I hope that's been a benefit to you, and I look forward to bringing you the next letter of the alphabet tomorrow and covering a little bit more about the A to Z of EFT. Thank you for joining me.